Welcome to Modern Alchemy episode number
45.
It is number 45.
Yes,
and this is a really, really exciting episode because this is our first ever spotlight.
Yes.
Those of you who have been following us for a while know that Bersabeh and I are kind of camera hogs and we just do our own thing usually and share information with you. And we decided we have some good friends that in a lot of different arenas of life who have some expertise in transmutation. And as a viewer, you know, that's about taking some of the low value and moving it into high value. So without getting much into that yet, let me just introduce our guest to you because we're super excited and honored to have Dawn and Tom here today. And let me tell you a little bit about who they are. Tom is a #1 best-selling author. He has a book called The 7 Rules of Achievement, Why Smart Goals Might Be Dumb. That's interesting. We could probably talk about that one too. And he also has a book called The 7-Step Comeback Plan, which, man, I could riff on that one with you probably for hours because I resonate with the comeback. He has a lot of things under his belt, and his belt is black. He has a black belt in multiple martial arts. He's former Fox Sports Net TV show host, producer, national bodybuilding champion. If you know anything about bodybuilding, which I grew up as a fiend and a fan. And again, this is a big moment for me to have Tom here because I used to look at him in magazines
when he was a kid.
I think we're close.
Still are.
But I used to look at him in magazines and he won Mr. America. So if you know anything about bodybuilding, that's a big thing. He has the AAU Athletic Legends Award. And just recently, I believe both of you have won the Health 2.0 Outstanding Leadership Award, which is really, really exciting. Also, you have a program called Experience the Leap, which maybe we'll talk about today. And there's been a lot of work in Special Olympics, New York Games for Physically Challenged, which is really very cool.
Yes, it is.
And on and on and on. And so the one thing I learned just recently, and I didn't know this, even though I've known Tom for years, is that he at one point had he calls it a deep relationship with drugs and alcohol. And so he's literally, talk about transmutation. He has literally transmuted his entire life. And that's Tom, but just as impressive, there's Dawn. She's a former national fitness model and a competitor, and she's sought after as an epigenetics coach. And I was telling her before we started, I know about epigenetics, but I've not heard of an epigenetics coach. So we've got to talk about that one, Dawn, at some point. She received the Outstanding Leadership Health 2.0 as well. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Kinesiology and from the University of Colorado. She's an EMT. What can we not say about the and the one thing that I think is really interesting in your bio, Dawn, is that you said as a fitness competitor that you've experienced firsthand the discipline and focus needed to accomplish any desired goal. And so, give us a big welcome today to Modern
Hey
guys. Our first spotlight. And hey guys, glad to have you. Thanks so much for honoring us with your presence.
We are thrilled to be with you guys. As you know, we love the two of you and we think very highly of you. And certainly James, like you, as a bodybuilding fan of mine years back, I happen to be a personal growth development. And even if we want to categorize that certainly it goes beyond that. It's a leadership training. It's, the work you've done over the years. I'm a big fan. I saw you first time presenting here in Denver, Colorado, several years ago, and turned to my partner and said, God dang, this guy is good. He knows his shit. Excuse my expression. I hope a couple of, bombs here and there is okay. But seriously, big fan. And Bear,
always have been.
We were so privileged to have the two of you on our Comeback Plan Summit. And you contributed so much to that program. I can't even tell you. In fact, we can give people a link, or you guys can provide a link later on that they can get a hold of that interview that we did, because it was spectacular. So we're pretty much thrilled to be here as well, man. We're excited about it.
Yeah, and Bersabeh had a lot less hair in that interview.
She did. But, I got to tell you, since we've had that interview with you guys on the Come Back Strong Summit, we felt such a kinship with both of you that it's like you've been part of our inner circle without actually physically being in it. So someday we're going to have to all get together and enjoy some FaceTime.
Absolutely. In fact, during that interview, we had so many people and so many great people on the summit, but the two of you were the only story of comeback that literally brought tears to my eyes. That's why I would love people to hear that. And I know you've shared your story over the last 40 or so episodes of you guys going back and forth, which is exciting and cool, because we're moving down that same path. But it literally brought tears to my eyes, and I won't say it's hard to choke me up, but it takes a specific emotion and feeling, and you resonated with that, man.
I certainly wouldn't want to be the choker.
You choked me out, man. I don't know what kind of martial arts you're playing out there.
How do you make a regular T-shirt look like a muscle shirt? Well, you're talking.
Well, I was trying to figure.
So, let's talk about this. Let's start here, and then we'll see where it goes, because I've got to know. I told you it's brand new for me, Tom. And you've never shared this with me before. Addiction is difficult. So when it comes to transmutation, and Bersabeh, it's interesting because Bersabeh was a smoker for 24 years.
Yeah.
And I know
a thing or two about addiction.
She does. And so do I now too, because I went through her detox with her for 5 years. And so I know too how difficult it is, as difficult as it was for me, not even close to what it was for her. Yeah. So talk about what were you addicted to? What were you doing? And how would you recommend that our viewers who have these kind of addictions go about transmuting that into something as powerful as you have?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you what, when we talk about drugs and alcohol, certainly those things are physically addictive. We know that. But what I was really, truly addicted to was the lifestyle. And the lifestyle that I was living at that time was that of an outlaw biker, literally riding with some of the most notorious outlaw bikers in the country at the time. I think I was a teenager when I got my first Harley Davidson. And I had been challenged early on, you might say. My twin brother and I both had dyslexia, hyperactivity. We were constantly fighting and in trouble as kids. As early as 4th grade, we were put into the special ed class. And as a result of that, you develop a stigma and you build a belief about yourself. You are stupid, you are dumb, you're not good enough. And in the biker world, that's called the 1%er. And not necessarily dumb or stupid enough, but outside the norm, well outside societal norms. And so I was a 1%er even in 4th grade, being in the special ed class. And so you develop these beliefs about yourself. As you know, you've taught these things, you share these things, you have coaching recommendations around this. I wish I had some more of that early on in my youth, because when I got into high school, even though some things had changed because I was participating in bodybuilding just to get a little bigger and feel a little sense of power and control, and I had some trophies, I had a little bit of success as a teenager, that soon went away. As soon as, and you know this process, as soon as something became totally incongruent with the deepest core beliefs, we call it the core truth that we all have, covered up by this crusty truth, so this core belief that I had at that time that I wasn't good enough. And so when I started winning in bodybuilding, bam, I found a way to sabotage that. And that was to get my first Harley Davidson motorcycle as a junior in high school. Rebuilt the thing. It was an old piece of crap, rebuilt it. And then, of course, in high school, there's no one to ride. Nobody's riding Harley Davidson choppers in high school, and I was the only one. So I started riding the streets of Manhattan looking for other guys to ride with and to connect with. And, of course, I connected with the wrong crew.
Let me just interject here for clarification. So if I hear you correctly, you were lifting and bodybuilding and competing even while still doing drugs and in a bike gang. Is that accurate?
Well, no, in high school, I started in junior high school working out, lifting weights, and it made a big difference in terms of my self-esteem, how I felt about myself. And I started to create a shift from being that kid that goes to school in the little yellow bus and, other kids pick on and make fun of, to becoming something else. I was starting to transmutate, you might say. Even at that time, there was that process that was taking place. It was a different belief system. I call it the do then believe. And as a bodybuilder, teenager, getting some trophies, entering my first contest, and feeling getting in front of an audience like that and starting to feel like a champion. I had even in high school, we were doing drugs and alcohol, but took a break. I was like, this is what I want to do. But unfortunately, the transmutation didn't hold. It didn't take. I still had these beliefs about myself so by the time I got as a junior in high school, and I'm on the verge of being a teenage champion bodybuilder, winning the Teenage America and some of the bigger contests at that time. And I already won some big ones. But again, keep in mind, they were just teenage shows. That change had started to go back again. I started to de-transmorph. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a month off. And that month off, I got that Harley. And then I started rebuilding it. And then I started doing drugs and alcohol, riding with a really bad crew. I connected as a teenager. You can imagine, there's a lot of bikers out there in the outlaw community that would love to have a mentee, like a teenage rebel. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'll teach you the ropes, kid. And that's who I had. Those were my mentors at that time. So I dropped out of high school in my senior year for getting into a fight and beating up a gym teacher. He was a young stud himself, man. It was a tough one. But that was the next 5 years then. I transformed back into the old beliefs, not good enough, not smart enough, stupid, even using the word retard, which I've been called many times back in those days, and became this outlaw biker. That's when the drugs and alcohol really began to take hold, because it's more about that lifestyle. And the lifestyle is drugs and alcohol. Whether you're distributing them, or doing them, or partying, or hanging out, or doing something else illegal, it's all a part of it. And if you're addicted to the lifestyle, which I was, you're addicted to the drugs and the alcohol as well. And that's really, it was more that emotional connection and that addiction than it was the physical to the drugs and alcohol themselves.
Yeah, the physical, I don't think was really much of a problem for you, but it was the cultural editors that he had, that he surrounded himself with, that really created that addiction for him. And it just basically drove him down that path.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So addiction, as you know, comes in all sorts of different forms. And for me, that's what it was. It was, in fact, I remember one of my first experiences going into Manhattan. My grandparents were very wealthy. My parents had none of that. And we were driving in for a holiday into Manhattan from Long Island, which is where I grew up. And I remember I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, feeling disenfranchised, feeling disempowered as this special ed student kid. And all of a sudden I hear this thunder, like thundering coming on. I'm like, what the heck? It's not raining or anything. I roll down my window. And all of a sudden, I mean, literally, it must have been 50 or 60 Harley Davidson choppers, Hell's Angels. And they're on their choppers, right? And the guy pulled right next to the car. I roll down my window. I look over and he's Scarface. He's got a big helmet on with horns. And he looks at me and he goes like this. And then boom, takes off. And to me, my interpretation of that was power, connection,
freedom,
creating a tribe of freedom, all the things that I wasn't even experiencing at even just 10 years old. And so I took that model forward with me. And when that first Harley Davidson showed up in my life, it transformed me back to that experience. And that's who I wanted to become. And that was the lifestyle I was addicted to.
Wow.
So what really changed it for you? Because again, there is a physiological withdrawal, obviously. Yeah. And I don't know what, maybe you're comfortable with sharing. What are we talking about? Cocaine?
Coke. In those days, of course, this was, in the early 80s, the late 70s, early 80s in Manhattan and Long Island, cocaine was the big drug of choice. And I had lots of friends. I never did any dealing, but I had lots of friends that were dealers and always had Coke and always had weed. And of course, the alcohol, the Jack Daniels, the Southern Comfort, those things were daily occurrences. Every single day we were doing either some Coke or some Jack or something. And so we always kept that buzz going, And even when we were riding, I wiped out the bike several times. We got into countless brawls over it. But really, cocaine was it for the most part. But I will say this, I was very fortunate because when the time came, when that moment of transformation came, that decision, that one moment decision that said, okay, this is not really who I am. I can change this. The struggle against the addiction of the alcohol and the drugs was never a big issue. I was very fortunate in that respect. The issue was no longer having the comrades, with no longer having the connection, with no longer having those guys that had my back and I had their back. I had to create a new tribe. So the addiction to the drugs and stuff, I will say this, I had friends that really struggled, that died, that wound up in jail. And I'm very blessed and very fortunate that it wasn't as big a struggle for me, the physical aspect of that addiction, for sure.
So here's what I would suggest might be a lesson, and Bersabeh, jump in anytime, because you have experience in this arena more so than I. And you know what you just said there on the end, Tom, it reminds me of research from Harvard University by Christakis and Fowler. And they prove in their research that your community drives your impact, your influence, and your income. And so it sounds, based on what you're saying, the community was the driver. I mean, it blows my mind that you had very little problems physiologically, and probably blows your mind too.
Yeah, I was addicted.
Because
I was addicted to the stuff.
The stuff, yes.
Not cocaine. But I mean, and it can be, and there's no question. I definitely had. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, there was definitely some withdrawals and some addiction, and for the most part, it was just like, I had a desire to, like, I drive by the bar where all the bikes were parked out. In fact, I had one experience where my twin brother was still involved in that lifestyle and doing the drugs and the alcohol. And I would drive by the bar and I'd see all the bikes out there. I'd see his bike out there, and it was just like, I was like, oh, just a little hit, just a little bump. You know what I mean? It just, and so the one time I did go in, it was not what I expected, not what I anticipated, which helped break that addiction, even the physical desire to go in and do a bump or do a couple of shots with some friends, reconnect. You know, I mean, it's just like you can never go back, as they say in many respects. And so when I did so, you know what, I'm going to stop in there. I was already in my bodybuilding career. I was already moving forward. It was a couple of years later. I stopped in. I overcame the resistance up to that point. And then I stopped in, especially because my brother was in there in the bar. It was called Huff's Tavern. And I walked in and I expected like this sort of like reception. Twigs, how you doing, man? We miss you, brother. Instead, it was like, who the freak are you, man? You think you're better than us? You're better than us now. You know, and it's just like, holy crap, I did not expect this, you know? And there was my brother, drunk out of his mind, throwing his Bowie knife across the room into the wall. I mean, it was just like, okay. That decision was completely solidified by that and other experiences that said, hey, maybe you're missing out on something. Maybe you need to go back, or maybe there was something more there than you thought.
And I think what really helped that transition for him was that he was already replacing one addiction for almost another, which would have been the bodybuilding.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a lot easier to get away from something if you know what you're going towards.
Yes.
Yeah. So Bear, I mean, for you had your struggle was then the physical component of withdrawals and the other aspects of the addiction.
Oh yeah, mine, you could say it was physical, it was emotional, because it came from a lot of trauma in my childhood that pushed me towards to doing things like that as an escape or a way to feel alive. So I struggled with both, meaning physical and emotional. It wasn't more of the community part, because it's funny for me. It was kind of the other way around. I wanted to be around people that didn't do that. So yeah, he didn't know I smoked.
No, we've been together 10 years and she's stopped smoking for 5 years. So the first 5 years, I didn't even know. She's sneaky that way, you know?
Wow.
I wasn't proud of it.
She was really good at it. I mean,
you're proud of that. Yes.
Gloves, smoke, so that her hands wouldn't smell like cigarettes. But I think this is an important point for the viewer, because a lot of people, maybe you're the extreme, Tom, or your story was the extreme.
Agreed.
And there's a couple of things that I'm gonna ferret out here, and you tell me, both of you, if you agree. First of all, if it's pretty well researched, and it's a fact that if you hang out with people who drink, there's a greater likelihood you're going to drink. If you hang out with people who are overweight, there's a greater likelihood you're going to be overweight. And why is that? Because you say, hey, let's go get a nice big leafy green salad, and they go, salad? What? What's that about?
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? And so it's interesting, because I heard Doc Amen say once that alcohol is the only drug that you have to come up with an excuse to not use. And I thought that was pretty profound, because how many times have you gone out socially, and maybe you as a viewer, you had this experience, oh, come on, have a drink with us. Just have a drink.
Just one.
What's the big deal? Come on, just have a drink. And okay. Well, so community, you've made this point. Community is vitally important.
Yeah.
And I think even though yours was physiological, Bersabeh, I think community was important.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
Yeah.
the people you surround yourself with are really, really important, and you need to pay attention to that. So would you agree that if you're going to transmute bad habits, be it alcohol or drugs or marijuana or any of those things, which really are deleterious to the body, they're deleterious to the brain, that you've got to take a look at your community? And that's a really big takeaway.
That's a big bite for a lot of people, because then they realize, well, you know, these people that I love, that I associate with, that accept me for doing X, are no longer gonna accept me any longer, because I am not part of that any longer. And so that's going to be a big challenge. And why I said before, you're going to have to find another way of going about that, finding a different community before you separate, you know, from your old community. And that's, you've got to find what works best for you, and have that change be strong enough for you to exit that old life.
Yeah, in the Experience the Leap, you mentioned our program is Experience the Leap. In Experience the Leap, we talk about it's the desire, and obviously we know this, the pain, the pleasure, what are we moving towards, moving away from, all these different things, the objective versus what we don't want. And in the Experience the Leap, it's just like, hey, for me, the drugs, the alcohol, the lifestyle, where it was headed, what I was seeing was happening to my friends along the way. And I call them friends, they were more like compadres.
Party buddy.
They were like cohorts more than anything, associates, was not what I wanted any longer. It was just, and it dawned on me that it wasn't congruent with who I really am and wanted to be ultimately. So I was very fortunate, though, to have another community to move towards. For some, it's a religious or a spiritual community. For me, it was a bodybuilding community, a gym. You know, as a teenager, I was training at a hardcore place called Future Man Gym, and it was like, you know, I was told as a teenager, don't even go in there, man. Those guys will eat you alive. You know what I mean? And the first time I went in, I threw up on the guy's floor. It was just horrible. As a teenager, I didn't want to even go back. But I did go back, and I was receptive, and they were receptive and warm. And it's like I felt like I was part of something else again, a new tribe, a new community. And you're right. These are the people that are lifting weights, eating healthy, enjoying a relatively healthy lifestyle. Of course, every lifestyle has its quirks, right?
Downsides.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Certainly a far cry from the previous lifestyle in community. But there's no question about it. If you're overweight, the vast majority, look at your friends, the vast majority of your friends are going to be overweight. If you're a drinker, the vast majority of your friends are going to be drinkers. If you're broke, they're probably broke as well. So we know that like attracts like in terms of energy, and it facilitates what it is that we're doing, our behavior, on a massive scale. And for me, it's just like, could I have been? In fact, I did know guys in the biker community that didn't drink, that didn't do the drugs. It was like, okay, that's pretty cool. They're still influenced by the lifestyle, but they weren't influenced enough to do those vices for the most part. So it can be up to the individual, but I think the community who you surround yourself with is going to influence big time.
You know what I find interesting, because growing up, I wasn't around any of that, and I might have been considered the goody two shoes.
Oh yeah.
I would still go out with, you know, the people who partied a lot and drank a lot, but I always had the glass apple juice jug full of water, and that was my high on life. So I was drunk on water, basically.
I remember one of the first parties we went to together. I mean, you know, we met some 30 years ago. and I had moved out from New York here to Colorado. And I remember she had some friends. She had a couple of friends that were like partiers, I mean, really partiers. And she didn't partake, but I didn't know that. And we went, and I'm having a beer or two, or whatever heck I'm having, not overdoing it, of course, at that time. It wasn't complete abstinence. It was, hey, it's all under control. It's not a big deal. And I remember, I'm like, what can I get you? She said, see if they have any milk. I was like, what? I said, we're going to party that hard tonight? Are you coating your stomach just in case? I had no idea. She was like, no, I have no interest. She had no interest in that stuff.
I want to digress for a moment because there's a second point to this. So the first one is community. Second point, Dawn, you made this point. And I've often said that all of us are addicts. It just depends on what you're addicted to. So you made the comment, Dawn, and maybe you'd like to expand upon this. He was almost replacing one addiction for another addiction. And I believe it or not, I spent a little time in the bodybuilding world in my 20s, and it's an addiction. I mean, I was working 2 hours in the morning, working out 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, double split, we called it. And it's an addiction. It's an obsession. Mm-hmm. And so would you say, Dawn, that you agree with that? Number one. Number two, is it important, you think, as for the viewer, if they have an addiction that is deleterious, that is harmful to the body, that is not empowering, they need to find something to do instead?
To do instead, yes. And especially when you can honor your body. I mean, you think of, especially with a lot of these hardcore hackers out there that are in that, whether it's the longevity world or the performance world, and they're trying to hack their way into their body. Well, I know so many that have gone way beyond that. It becomes, again, deleterious to their body and becomes addiction. Harmful. And so that road itself can lead to addiction. So we've got to, and I don't want to say everything in moderation, because that doesn't, a lot of times when there's too much balance, it can create no growth, no experience. You need to have some of those extremes to have an appreciation for what the middle is like.
Totally agree. I we like the word harmony versus balance, because harmony is dynamic. It's dynamic. Balance is static. But you did that. I mean, you replaced your old habits with new habits.
Yeah, I did.
And now you're kind of addicted to running sprints.
I have to.
We do, though. We develop. And you're right. We're all addicts, James. We are all addicts in one way or another. We're addicts to either the type of foods we eat, the drinks, our families, our community, any number of things, right? And so we have to keep that in check and make sure we find harmony with whatever it is we're addicted to, and that it's positive, that has some positive effect on our mind, our emotions, our physiology. So for me, there's no question about it. And James, you talk about the double split routines in the morning and the night. I mean, it really does become, and I see it now even more so. I will say this, and I think maybe it's just that I don't have a tremendously addictive personality, because even in the bodybuilding world, and you'll remember back in the 80s, it was either the hot skins or the baggy pants and the tank tops. And I had a national championship level physique that I could have wore those things, but God, no, I would never. It was like, that was like the addiction. It's like, I'm a bodybuilder full time. I wear it even when I go out to dinner at a 7-star restaurant. I'm wearing my tank top, I mean, that's the full lifestyle.
I knew that a lot of guys.
It's like, put on a button-up shirt. Come on, man.
I got to tell you a funny aside story, and just humorous as a viewer. When I was bodybuilding, there was a guy named Jim, big Italian guy, biggest guy in the gym, and he comes up to me one day and he goes, "Hey, they have a fair out in the parking lot at the mall this weekend." I'm like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Let's go and wear tank tops and scare some people. What do you think?"
Absolutely. I had friends like that too.
So brilliant,
Yes. And for me, so I think for me, the goal at the bodybuilding time, was I wanted more. It was more important to me to not intimidate or create fear or be a freak. it was to win people over. I wanted people to realize, hey, you know what? Bodybuilders can be intelligent. They're not just muscle heads. You know what I mean? They can put two sentences together. They can be friendly. They can help people out in the gym. I'm so blessed today. We had I had two athletic clubs, big athletic clubs back in Long Island in the day. And, you know, with social media now, people you haven't seen in years or visited with or barely remember. We had so many members, I can't possibly remember them all. But I still get stories about some young kid. Hey, I was only a teenager at the time, and I remember you came up to me and you gave me some encouragement. You told me how to do this and do that, and you even gave me your belt that said Mr. America. You even I'm like, I did that? Why would I do that?
Hey, can I have it back?
Hey, you still have it? Let's have it. But it's the winning people over, helping my community as a bodybuilder was very important to me to create a better public relations, a better image for the sport. Unfortunately, it didn't put a dent in it, you know, and it's still continuing down the tank top path. But hey, it is what it is, man.
Yeah, well, you're still legendary, and
yeah, I'm gonna put up some pictures for the viewers.
If I'm correct,
it up.
I don't know this for sure, but if I'm correct, you're at least you're close to 60 or you're in your 60s.
Just turned 64.
Yeah, just turned 64. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Same age. Why don't I look like this?
No.
Why don't I look?
So,
actually, I'm 65. I just turned 65.
No,
congratulations.
Kidding.
Yeah.
So we were really in that bodybuilding community around that same exact time, man. But I got to tell you this, and Bear, you know this. James, you look fantastic, man. What I wouldn't do for that hair, come on.
Well, I was thinking when you said you saw me speak years ago, I had a lot less gray hair then. I'm pretty sure about that. In fact, I didn't even have any gray hair till I got married, but that's another subject.
Oh, that's a whole nother story.
Whole nother story. But Dawn, let's talk about to you for a minute, because you've achieved a lot of recognition as well,
Mhm.
and for fitness and health. And I'm really fascinated about this epigenetics coaching. So tell us a little bit about where you started and how you got to where you are.
Well, it really started, I've always been interested in health and fitness from a very young age. So that has carried my interest into now, but more so when I learned that I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And Hashimoto's is basically not everybody with hypothyroid gets Hashimoto's, and those with Hashimoto's don't necessarily have hypothyroid, but it's antibodies attacking the thyroid tissue. So for whatever reason, it's an autoimmune condition that, for me, it affects the thyroid. So going to doctor after doctor, realizing they're not giving me the support and help that I needed. I'm my own best doctor when it comes to that. So I just dug deep into the research. And that's when I came across the epigenetics and reading genetics and blood tests and understanding how the body operates more outside of muscle and the mechanical side of the body that I was schooled in kinesiology. But really understanding the mechanisms of how the body works. And I mean, still, that's truly, as much as we know about the body today, that's still in the infancy. Just learning about, the microbiome and, the microbiome that's in the brain and just all this interesting stuff that's going on. We're still in the infancy of understanding what we're capable of, at least in research that we're capable of. I think on a day-to-day, we're exhibiting a lot of that power and the performance, but not really understanding that on the clinical scientific side. So that's, really my journey has brought it into the epigenetic realm of more so of these mechanical systems and how they work and what that means for the genes to express or not to express and how to manipulate that, how to influence those genes to perform for longevity, for performance in cognitive ability or out on the track and field.
And so just for me too, because it's always been like, okay, what is the definition? And I think for a lot of listeners, it's like, well, what exactly is epigenetics?
Well, you've got your genes. We are all familiar. That's the blueprint of our body. And you can kind of relate that if we were to bring it down to more of a like a car or a computer. The genes would be the hardware, and they're basically inert without their environment, so that they don't run. The hardware doesn't run without the software, and the software would be those tags that are put on to the DNA and the rest of the cells within the body to become active. So it's all of a response to the environment. We were talking about the cultural editors that we're involved with, whether it's addiction or society, that sort of thing. It's all of that environment. The thoughts that we think are even part of that. So if you're constantly looking in the mirror saying you're so stupid and you're so fat or whatever negative thing that you're thinking of has an impact on your body. And that is basically telling the program, the DNA, how to respond.
So some of the research I've read in epigenetics, and it's certainly not as extensive as yours, obviously, is that epigenetics tells us that about 50% of who we are, what we are, is genetic. Well, the good news is that the other 50% is environmental and habits. Continuous habits. Is that your understanding as well? And is that what you've?
They're finding that it's actually a much greater percentage that you're in control of. That it could be anywhere between 85 to 90% that is of your control. Again, the genes are the hardware, and it's you have the influence over the genes to dictate with whether it's not necessarily just one nutrient, because it's never just one gene either that causes disease or malaise. So it is the combination of it all. And it's not just how much you run or how much you sleep, but is also in combination with a proper diet. That's getting all of that programmed into the system.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, obviously, right? And there's nothing more talked about than exercise when it comes to these diseases that we have influence over. People say, well, I've got this gene, I had the gene for cancer or for diabetes, or I've got the gene for Alzheimer's.
Well, a big one is like the BRCA gene. A couple of years ago, Angelina Jolie, she realized that she had the BRCA gene for breast cancer. And so I don't know if she actually went through the full mastectomy that was so talked about within the news, but she had a great opportunity not to have that gene expressed, because a lot of us have a lot of negative genes already within the system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to express. It doesn't mean just because you have that variant, and there are no mutations to genes, there are just variants to different types of genes that you don't know, and or you have a greater control to provide the environment for those genes not to express.
And that's where exercise and nutrition, and I mean, James, you know this, you teach this, I mean, this is on a quantum level, how we think, what we believe. If we believe we got, that's it, it's the end of the world, I've got this gene, I've just been diagnosed, that's a, you become that becomes your reality. And I think that's one of the benefits of doing DNA testing in advance early on. It's just like, okay, not after I've got the disease, but before, we could say, okay, I can choose to believe this, I've got this particular gene, I've got this variant, or I can choose to deactivate it with everything that I do in my environment, my behavior, my thoughts, my nutrition, all these different things. And that's really the epigenetic component, which is all those things that we can do to influence on or off in terms of whether those genes might be positive or negative.
Yeah. So I want to continue this conversation, and you're going to have to forgive me because we're going to have to pause here.
We're going to have to take a break.
I have to run to the restroom.
I'm sure this guy does too.
Thank you. My bladder is the biggest factor in how long I can go with anything.
Liquid.
I love it.
All right, I'm going to go too then, Dawn. I'm sorry.
Perfect. You got it. You got it.
Right.
This meeting is being recorded.
We're back.
And so, Dawn, if I were going to come to you as an epigenetic coach, and we've talked a lot about what epigenetics is, hopefully our viewer has at least a cursory understanding of that. What kinds of things would you be working with me on?
Well, first, I guess with any industry, any coach should know really what the goal is first, because you wouldn't want to change I should say, let's say, improve something that is not within the wheelhouse of the person. If that's not their focus, you wouldn't want to manipulate that in any way. So it really depends upon the goal of the person first, getting symptoms from them, and then look at really what they want to optimize. And so for some people, that might just be sleep, that they just can't sleep, and they say they try this and try that. Well, it could be a nutritional component. It could be simply something from their pillow. So it really just depends upon ultimately starting with their goals and what means the most to them.
Do you take a lot of supplements, Dawn?
I am my own guinea pig for sure, and this is my second one. Yeah. As far as supplements, not any one nutrient per se is going to move the needle a whole lot. So I'm definitely a whole foods based person. You've got to start there first. And that's got to making sure that you're getting the right amount of protein, all the macros, looking at the micronutrients as well, because that would be the next thing. That's the next lever to move when it comes to nutrition. So working with supplements, very often it just comes down to, well, how much, certain polyphenol could we put in there? And those are smaller levels to work at. So really when it comes to whole food based supplements, that's where I would go to the glandulars and the organ meats.
What's interesting about that too is that as I hear you talk about it, it's, a lot of times, individuals and a lot of listeners probably will say, hey, you know what, I need to get on this supplement or that supplement or this, but not pay close attention to their overall whole diet. And how they're eating, when they're eating, the structure of it. Are they getting enough fiber? Are they getting enough protein? Or the macros first and then the micros along the way. And creating those little micro changes along the way, diet-wise, is really the first place to start, as you said. And it's so interesting because there's so much emphasis around, and Dawn mentioned this earlier, the body hacking. It's just like, well, you know what, I'm getting a little bit older. I'm gonna use the hyperbaric chamber, or I'm going to use red light therapy, or I'm gonna do cold plunges. And those are great and can definitely move the needle a little bit. But if you're not paying attention to how much you're moving, and it doesn't necessarily have to be exercise formal, it could be more like our ancestors, or just moving the body, getting out there, gardening, whatever it might be, and then cleaning up and paying attention to how you're eating, how much water you're drinking. Then those other things can start to move the needle a little bit. Instead of trying to hack, let's get in there and do the basics first.
Exercise and nutrition are some of the greatest, literally, drugs that you can provide for not only mind-body performance, but also longevity. And there's really a gray area between the two, because really you can't do one without the other. You can't necessarily just say, well, this supplement's only for longevity and this one's only for performance. They're really a combination of the both.
They definitely interact with each other. Do you believe that in today's world, with the depleted soils and the things and the toxins and the chemicals that are being put into the foods, that we can get enough nutrients and micronutrients without supplementation?
Boy, that's such a big subject, and with is far away. What did they say, that it's 2,000 miles for the average broccoli to make it to your table, from farm to table. And so you consider the amount of nutrient loss during those food miles, and then how long it sits in the grocery store before you actually take it to your house, and how long it sits in the refrigerator. So there could be a loss of 50% of nutrient before you actually cook it and ingest it.
And that's following a loss of the nutrients that are not being put back into the soils these days. So on top of that, I think probably the answer to that question is it'd be difficult. It would be beneficial to eat whole foods, but it'd be difficult, wouldn't it, just to get everything you need?
It would. And really then it's, the body's complex, and what goes into the body is also complex too, because it really comes back to not only the environment of the soil, as you had mentioned, the toxins then that the food is in, because often, a lot of these pesticides, when they're sprayed onto, let's say, a vegetable, they are losing nutrients because that vegetable doesn't have to fight the elements. And it's when a vegetable is more stressed that it creates more polyphenols and has to boost its own defense mechanism that could be hampering the nutritional quality as well. Wow. So you not only just getting rid of the toxins of the pesticides, but not putting that plant under stress is reducing the amount of nutrient that you actually be getting from the plant.
Yeah, that's kind of how they create. Not that we're drinkers, and we've already talked about not doing that. But what comes to mind is when I used to drink wine occasionally. The finest wine is the grape that has enough stress on it that it doesn't die. It's not over. It's underwatered on purpose, just so there's enough stress, and it makes the finest wine. And I think it's a great metaphor for what you're talking.
That's right. Yeah, and that's where you're going to get the greatest amount of nutrient. And the complexity of things. If we can buy local, then I would look at that if that farmer is doing organic or not. But really buying local, really from anything, not just your food source, but just supporting your community in that way is also going to impact you. When you buy local, whether that be fruit, vegetables, or meat, you're also impacting your epigenome because you're getting the stresses and the information from your community that you're then ingesting and then communicating with your cells. So that's also important because the broccoli that you're eating 2,000 miles away is that environment, but it's not your current environment. So that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but that Bersabeh and I, we have a farmer's market that comes to our neighborhood every 2 weeks. And we get local honey, which has all the local things in it. And Bersabeh was just saying, we used to buy our produce there, and now we've kind of gotten used
know if it's organic
to Whole Foods. But that Whole Foods is traveling a long ways too.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
It is. I will say this, go back to the supplement. It's like we have these little, they're not shot glasses. They're sort of like measuring glasses, the little, stainless steel cups.
When you go to like your greasy spoon and you've got your burger and your fries and they give you that little metal cup for the ketchup and the mustard.
Yeah.
That's
so
what he's
that's it.
talking about.
And it's just like, it's full with supplements in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. And man, do I get in trouble. If there's one of those cups left over, it's just like, you didn't do your supplements last night. Why didn't you do? It's like, whoa, I can't take it.
There's a roller coaster over here.
Man.
We take a ton of supplements, and we don't live extravagant lives. We stay home a lot, and we like kind of a simple life. And yet, when you look at our biggest expenditures, it's food and supplements. Our largest expenditures.
We're living large.
Are food and supplements.
Every time I go out the front door, there's a package. And it's like, oh, what exciting thing has arrived? And it's just like, another thing of supplements. I shake the package. It's like freaking cow something or other. It's all good though, man. It's all good.
Liver. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to a question that I prepared in advance. And Dawn, you kind of answered it, but I'm going to push on you a little bit here because you said that exercise and nutrition go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. Well, here's what we know, according to the most recent research. And I just looked this up to verify it yesterday. 31% of people in America are overweight. And
that low? No, I think it's a little higher than that.
Certainly looks like it.
We'll be
But anyway, so let's
42%
overweight, not obese.
Yeah, 42% are obese. That's 5 people. So I'm going to guess, and the current research that I've heard as well is that about 50. We're new into the year. About 50% of the people want to lose some weight. So if you had to choose between nutrition or exercise, and you can only pick one, which one would it be and why?
Ooh, that's provocative.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that because I look at movement and exercise as a nutrient. So I would say nutrition.
That's a cop-out.
And that covers both bases.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let you nail her down here.
maybe. So go ahead. I'm playing.
Well, and let me expand upon that just a little bit, and why movement is really so important, because you've got very often you've got, when you describe your cardiovascular system, you think your heart, your lungs, veins, the whole package as far as how that goes. But it's really the muscles that are really important part of that piece. Because if you're sitting here, like we've been sitting here, better part of an hour, and other than brief movements with our arms and within our face, we're really not moving a whole lot. That means the heart has to do a lot of the pumping. When you're, doing bigger movements throughout the day, maybe every 20 minutes, say, just getting up, walking downstairs, walking back up the stairs, you're providing the nutrients that you have ingested, have assimilated through the body, able to get through the rest of the system without your heart having to work so much. And you hear a lot of these cardiologists say, well, if you just get on that treadmill more, but then the rest of the time that patient is sitting around, it's putting extra stress on the heart to get the heart rate up to the full heart rate capacity while it's on the treadmill, say, and making more work for the heart, which in turn is not giving the body really what it needs.
Oh, wow.
Let me, can I add something to this? Because it's just, again, I've got a slightly different perspective. And again, it is around movement. I'm a formal exercise guy, as you've been. And formal meaning being in the gym. That's right. I like being in the gym. We exercise outside as well, but the gym has become that addiction, and it's just like it's a lifelong one, right? But we don't have to. The exercise can easily be outside. It could be just movement. It could be gardening. It's really about movement and getting your body through its full range of motion on a daily basis, and that helps slow the aging process. It helps us perform better. So I would go with exercise in that respect for another reason as well, because if we exercise or move our bodies on a regular basis and we begin to feel that stimulation and we feel better, we're breathing a little bit better, it's palpable very quickly for the most part. If you're relatively sedentary most of the time and you start to move, you start to do formal or not formal exercise, you feel it relatively quickly. It'll take a while before it becomes visually effective, but you feel it. And that itself creates that, what I talked about earlier, James, is the do then believe model. If I start to feel better, I believe I can feel even better than that. I can be more than that. And that has an impact on our nutritional approach. I might be less apt to go to Burger King or to KFC. I might opt in for something just a little healthier because I'm starting to feel better. You know what? Let me start taking a little bit more control of that. And I've seen that happen several times. So I would vote for exercise as number one.
Nice.
Of
Good
course,
answer.
and
Everybody into a vote there.
I'm with you. Bersabeh likes to run sprints, and we go to the gym 3 days a week, which has changed a lot. And I want to ask you about that, Tom, because I'm not doing double splits anymore, and I'm not doing
good
days on, 1 day off, or 6 days, whatever. Now what we do, and I'll tell you what we do, and we've done it for the last 2 years, maybe. Is we do 3 days a week, full body, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then on Saturday I go in because one of these days I want to have arms like you, and I'm just not a quitter, I'm just not a quitter, and deltoids, and so I go out on Saturdays and I do shoulders and arms on Saturdays, and Bersabeh runs. But how has your routine? We're similar age. I'm a little bit ahead of you. How has your routine changed over the years?
It's been more intense. I'm going to answer that for him because he's now training with me.
Yeah. It's not easy. I got to be honest. Dawn's 14 years younger than me, and I got to keep up with that. And it's not always easy. There are some times when we get to the gym, and it's just like, I say so, and we've got a routine that we like to do, and we undulate between that and different routines throughout the year just to keep the body interested. And I hate to use that cliche, keep the body guessing, man.
But it's also training with the seasons.
It is. We train with the seasons quite a bit, but it has changed. And when Dawn talked about intensity, That's primarily because Dawn was never around when I was training for the Mr. Olympia contest. That was intensity. I mean, there were times when I would be on the floor after a workout. I would generally have to take a 20-minute meditation, relax break right after workout, just laying in some dark corner of the gym with a towel over my face just to try and recover enough to get in the car and drive home. These were that intense, so the intensity level has dropped because of several reasons. One, recovery is much slower now. As you age, your recovery it just slows down. You don't have quite the same energy you used to have, and recovery is definitely a bigger process. The other thing I do more is I think we might be training more frequently, but with less intensity and less duration. So the duration has come down too. I used to train, it would be about an hour and a half or so. And then maybe the split routine where it's in the morning, an hour and a half, another 45 minutes to an hour in the evening, like you were doing. That has changed. So the frequency, again, because of the recovery, had to change a little bit. So we train 5 days a week, and we mix it up. We do 3 days of a specific routine, and then we go in and we do either some sprints or some kind of cardiovascular, or we just go in and stretch. And then on Saturday, that 5th day, let's just say, we go in, we do what you do. We do the whole body, and we make it fast. We do the full supersetting. We want to get in and out of there. We try and keep it into about 40 minutes or so. But yeah, the recovery has slowed down a little bit. That definitely takes more time. So the frequency has increased. The duration has decreased, as has the intensity level. It has to decrease a bit. There can't be as many forced reps. Going to failure is a once in a while experience now.
We're not training for competition, and things would be different had we would be. So as far as the intensity level, I would say we're hitting anywhere between 75 and 85% of the capacity for that day.
Yeah. So it has definitely changed a little bit. And the other thing too that's changed, and James, I'm sure you can relate to this too, being around the same age. So if I squat at all, it's body weight squats, it's dumbbell squats, it's never heavy on the back squats, big bent over rows, all those big deadlift movements and stuff. Those are non-existent in the routine now. There's replacements for them, but those big movements that threaten the muscle. In fact, what we wanted to do back in those days was shock and threaten the central nervous system to create an endocrine response. Hormones, growth hormone, testosterone. Today, if we do that, it's too big a shock. It's too big a risk to the body. And the injury, once you get a little bit older, it's if you hurt your back deadlifting or squatting or something like that, it sets you back. It's not worth it. It's not a week or so. It's now a couple of months. You've got issues, man. So we modify all that stuff now.
I think I hear you saying you don't do a lot of compound movements anymore. And for the viewer, if you don't know what that means, it works major muscle groups, a variety of major muscle groups. Right. So there's no back squatting, no deadlifting, bench press.
Bench press we still do. It's all modified too.
And we still do some deadlifts, but it's on the lighter side.
Yeah, we'll do it with dumbbells or keep it light. Just really kind of feel, it's really more about, I will say this, there was a stage in my bodybuilding career, and I'm sure every bodybuilder can relate to this, is where it was no longer just about lifting heavy weights and digging in and almost killing yourself, but rather connecting with the body. And my bodybuilding career improved substantially. I wouldn't have made it to the pro level and competed in the Olympia had I not gone through this mental, physical connection shift, which we now call body rapport, is to know, like, and trust your body. At one point, I was just the athlete who was telling my body to shut up and do it all the time. Just do it. Even though it was telling me, it was communicating with me on a cellular level, on an unconscious level, that's just like, hey, that's too much, or you need a break, or you need to take a rest. Something was going on and I wasn't listening. So once I started listening and communicating on a deeper level, I mean, literally every contraction, it wasn't about how many reps I could do. It was how deep can I contract that muscle during any given one rep. So a 10 rep set wasn't a 10 rep set. It was one set of 10 repetitions done with maximum quality and maximum depth of contraction. That made all the difference in the world. And that's still what we apply today. And that makes a little difference. So we don't have to deadlift heavy. We don't have to squat heavy. Granted, I'm 20 or 30 pounds lighter with muscle, but that's desirable for me. I don't want to be 200 pounds at 64 years old. It's way too much work for the heart and lungs and too intimidating. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I wore a tank top to some party. I said, Dawn, let's put on some tank tops and scare the hell out of these people.
And I'm sure
It was the last time we were invited to any party.
so.
Oh
Man,
goodness.
this is good. We could talk forever.
I know.
Let me just maybe do you have
Yes, sir.
anything that you're just
I wanted
Bernie,
to know the diet piece. So what does your diet consist of in a days or weeks or however
Great question.
you're sharing?
Well, for me, I work best with a protein shake. And when I say protein, yes, that has grass-fed whey in it, but then a myriad of other things, including glycine, tyrosine, ginger,
Green
cinnamon.
tea extract.
There's a lot that goes into
turmeric,
it. So
turmeric, the amount of turmeric in these shakes, it's like
there's quite a bit that goes into that.
Yeah.
Then we always have like an egg meal midday with lots of vegetables, and then finish that up a few times a week with fish and or chicken beef for a light meal in the evening, again with lots of vegetables.
And then we'll do some nuts in between. Our vice is chocolate covered almonds. We try and keep
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate, and but that's our vice. We'll grab 4 or 5 of those, and that's like, oh man. I will admit though, once you have that kind of little vice and you treat yourself to a few, it escalates. It is like a drug in many respects. It's like, okay, we started with, okay, we're going to treat ourselves to 4 of these dark chocolate covered almonds, and now it's at 6. Suddenly it's 7. I had 10 yesterday. I'm like, what the hell?
peanut butter.
What are your thoughts on
Peanut butter. I'm a peanut butter guy too. You're a peanut butter?
Sit right off the spoon.
I can't.
Oh yeah.
He's like, I got to cut back on the peanut butter, so I'm only going to 1 spoon. And then last night I come around the corner and the closet door is open and there she is.
Yeah.
It is. I know. I love that, like pre-workout. I'll do a banana or an apple, and I always think it's like the bites of the apples is big, and each one has this giant smear of peanut butter. It's really a jar of peanut butter. Accompanied by a little fiber, but for the most part, we keep it wheat and grain free for the most part. I'll do a little bit of grains here and there, but Dawn doesn't do really any of that. Lots of vegetables, almost with every single meal, some vegetable source, lean protein, keeping it close to paleo style, really, that's sort of our approach for the most part.
And a lot of things that I think people neglect with their food, especially when they hear, well, I'm going to be eating chicken and vegetables. How plain is that? But you can really make that very delicious by a variety of different herbs. And that's going to help your epigenome so much more through the DNA methylation process, just the methylation process in itself, not just DNA, by little bioactives, not just from the taste buds, but then how that's interacting for cofactors throughout the system.
Yeah, it's funny because every morning, we'll have our shake early, go train. I'll work with a couple of clients. We'll come back and we have eggs, and we usually have a cup of coffee with that. So a variety of eggs. We'll usually do it with tons of vegetables, right? I mean, spinach and kale and asparagus. Cooked in, and we'll scramble it up. Every now and again, I sneak in some cheese. She doesn't know it, but I'm doing it anyway. And but every once in a while, we'll also cook fried, just to add a variety. I'll do some fried eggs, and they're just plain fried eggs. She made the fried eggs today because I was in the process of something, and my God, the seasoning! I was like, "What the hell is this?" It was so good. It was like a 5-star restaurant fried egg, and it was like, "Oh, it's some new seasoning she just bought." I was like, "Wow, this is great, man! Just simple fried egg."
So Tom, how many eggs at a time?
Eggs?
Used to be, you remember what it was like. Eggs were the staple, man. I
used to eat a dozen a day.
A dozen a day. That was like it.
Talk about eating it now. How many do you normally eat?
Occasionally, if I'm really hungry and I know I've had a great training session or something, I'll do 4. That's it. But generally it's 3. So we'll cook up 5 eggs. Dawn will do 2. I do 3, and that's about it for right now. And of course, I have no problem if it's more. We're doing hard-boiled eggs occasionally too. Yeah. Why? What are you thinking?
Well,
we do too, and we heard that 2 a day is like a safe bet.
She's
I don't know if it's true or not.
She's like
Who knows?
Gestapo, on stuff, and I'm like, I could easily eat 3 eggs. I used to eat a dozen. Well,
Yeah.
Two.
Okay. And Dawn will talk more about this, but there's been a whole shift in terms of saturated fat, cholesterol, in terms of their demonization over the years, and have now come completely almost full circle that we need more. If you haven't read and I'm sure you have, but if you haven't read the Grain Brain or the Wheat Belly Diet, it talks about eliminating most of the grains, but really adding back in or less demonizing of saturated fats that we needed. So eggs are right at the top of that list because they're so, you could really almost exist on eggs alone.
Well,
I
not
could.
so much. But they have a variety of how you cook the eggs, because having the whites should always be cooked, but the yellow yolk, keeping that more on the liquid side, you're going to be getting more choline, so that you're going to be helping your brain. You're going to be helping muscle contraction. So, and a lot of people are very often choline deficient. So getting a couple of fried eggs in a couple of times a week is really beneficial for you.
Runny. I hate them runny.
Yeah, she likes them. I prefer them. Yeah, a little less runny, but
a little over easy. Yeah.
They're runny, then you've got to have bread to soak it up, and I try to stay away from the bread. So
I know.
Don't try. I do. I stay away from the bread.
Yep.
I have a confession though. I do, and again, what we do gluten free, but I do if I'm not doing the shake in the morning, and sometimes when I have to dash out or it's a pre-workout, I'm addicted. The peanut butter thing, I'm addicted to peanut butter, jelly, and banana sandwiches. I got to be honest. That's like my serious vice. Outside those chocolate almonds, just a peanut butter, banana, and jelly. Of course, it's low sugar. Everything's organic, but still, man, you toast that up, and there's a treat right there. There's dessert.
Well, talk about fats. My vice is macadamia nuts, and
really good for you.
I know they are great.
Yeah.
And so we do quite a few macadamia nuts.
Yeah, I love those. I'm a pistachio nut guy.
Me too. Those are good too.
Pistachios are cool because it slows you down. If you don't get them deshelled already, right? It's just like it's a little work. You get them deshelled already?
I don't like to work to eat. I'm not a fan of lobster. You have to do all this work, and you get a little piece of meat. It's just
a tremendous amount of work.
I was just going to say, a pistachio addict when you see their thumbs, if they're worn out from opening up those shells.
Yeah.
That is true.
We could talk forever.
I know.
Did you do you have any more questions for Dawn about diet?
I do. Just one last one. So when beef, okay, is it?
It's what's for dinner.
Is it good to eat? Because all this new fads come out, to eat more fat is good for you. So get a cut that's got more fat in it. In beef, would that be good for you, or is that not? Is it better to eat more of a lean cut?
Well, you would you can look at that from a couple of different perspectives, and all of them do lean to eating red meat is good for you. And not necessarily just the lean cuts, because you're not going to go to those lean cuts. They're dry, they're tough, they're fibrous, they're tough to eat. So go for those fattier cuts, be beneficial. You just want to make sure that you're not, you're just not searing those meats to get a lot of those carcinogens. So you just, at lower temperatures, cook them at.
Yeah, when the fats burn, that's not good.
Right. So, but make sure, get them from grass-fed, grass-finished sources, because you're going to have higher omega-3 to omega-6. And omega-6 isn't bad. It's just that we get too much of it within our diet. It's more of the pro-inflammatory of the fats. But you have to have that harmony. I'll use your word, James. You've got to have the harmony between the omega-3, which is anti-inflammatory, and the omega-6, which we get too much in our diet. So that's why they've kind of demonized omega-6, but we still need that. We still need inflammation for our bodies to operate. It's just when it becomes rampant.
Yeah.
So going back to the red meat, if you buy grass-fed, grass-finished, they're not being fed on grains, particularly corn, which increases that omega-6. Plus, then they're getting some of the bugs that they're getting in the grass. Hopefully it is a nice pasture that they're in and they're eating it. And same thing with eggs too. If the chickens are happy, if the cows are happy, generally the meat will be happy and you'll be ingesting that as well.
They used to say happy wife, happy life. Now it's happy cow, happy life.
Well, we could talk forever.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Have any more nutritional questions?
I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, I'll save it for next
I just
time.
had to say, too many omega-6s. You know how you spell that? Peanut butter. Anyway.
This is true.
Oh.
Yeah, right. So let's kind of bring this. We've talked a lot about physiology, which we should. You guys are the experts.
Yeah.
We live in turbulent times. That's a fact. A lot of people are dealing with major difficulties, and there's a lot of disruption in the world. Alchemy, as we've discussed, is about taking something that's difficult or something of low value and transmuting it into something of high value. What advice, and we'd love to hear from both of you, what advice would you have for our viewers to practice alchemy in these difficult times, and how specifically can they do that?
Well, if I can take this one
Sure, of course.
for the moment, is that in these difficult times, it's really where you put your focus, because in the turbulence, there can be opportunity. And that could be just somebody next door that could use your assistance and your guidance, maybe just a love or a hug, a smile, for crying out loud. That is very impactful. Not to be political, but that's where we lost 2 years wearing masks. We weren't able to see the smiles. We could see the kindness, hopefully, in their eyes, but even eyes were more diverted when we couldn't see their faces. So that could offer a lot of opportunity to reach out and, become more prosperous in a way.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That, again, the focus is such a key right now. If we want to create a transmutation in our own lives, instead of being pulled into the struggle and the challenge, which we're going to face, we're going to feel it. It's going to impact our lives one way or the other. But how you address it, how you look at it, how you face it, those opportunities to give. I not to say anything about myself, but the other day, it's freezing cold here in Denver, Colorado right now. And the other day I saw a woman walking down the street barefoot, homeless, barefoot, freezing. It was cold. I didn't even want to be out for 10 seconds. I had to stop, and I gave her my shoes. She resisted, because they do, but I had to stop and do something. And so when we feel like we have the ability to contribute rather than be a victim and being pulled into this conflict and the struggle that we're all involved in for the most part, but rather give back and find an opportunity. It's funny, I have a very dear friend, I can't say who just literally got their I don't know if they call it a badge or a pin or whatever it is, for getting through Hell Week, which is the final week of Navy SEAL training. A very dear friend of mine, young man. And one of the things that I shared with him, and that is part of his DNA, you might say, and that I heard from another Navy SEAL, from the Navy SEAL 6 team, who talked about getting through that training. He said all the difficulties he's had since then, being in Afghanistan and in war and battle and all this, that was the toughest thing he'd ever had to experience. And he says the way you get through it, the guys that survive it are not the ones that are the macho tattooed, I'm going to get through, I'm going to kick everybody else's butt, I'm going to show them how it's done. It's the guys who care about the guy next to him. If you're helping the man next to you, it takes the focus off your own struggle and your own challenges. And as we know, in general, for the most part, we will do more for others than we will for ourselves. We watched a great movie about that the other night called Arctic. And the guy who had been stranded in the Arctic had many opportunities to find a way to escape, but he was comfortable in the environment that he had created, waiting for rescue. I could survive, I could wait it out, until he had to save someone else. And then he was able to find the strength and the will to make the journey needed. And for a Navy SEAL and for all of us living at home today, facing these struggles, if we find a way to support others and share with others and help lift them, I think that's the thing that can help transform us ultimately.
Well, that's a great end note right there. And you guys have certainly been that for us today.
Yeah.
And I know you're doing that for every single person that you touch. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you and to reach out and connect with you?
Well, along the path that we were talking about with the epigenetics, you could reach out to us and learn more about yourself by going through vitalityscore.com. And there you'll be able to go through your own little personal journey and experience some things that maybe you didn't even know about yourself. That's one point of contact. There's also highachieversuniversity.com.
And of course, Dawn's site, where she gives out so much great information, and you have an opportunity to work with her directly and go through that vitality score right from there, which is called influentialdna.com, influentialdna.com. And of course, find us on social media. Tom Terwilliger on Facebook, Instagram, it's all right there.
Yeah, and we'll put all that information
In the copy
below. Listen, guys, thank you so much for your time and your energy and just who you are as human beings. And as a viewer, hopefully this has been of value to you. If it hasn't been, then you must be asleep. Really, so wake up. It's time to wake up. We really appreciate your time and your attention. And next week, we'll be back with you, and we're getting into a whole new topic on environment, the alchemy of environment. So stay tuned. Have lots of love.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Honored.